It was 4:30 on a quiet Bengaluru morning. While the rest of Malleshwaram slept, 71-year-old Venkatesh opened his eyes. For a few moments, he lay perfectly still. Then his right hand reached toward the bedside table. His fingers found a tablet. He tapped a small green icon. Three simple words appeared on the screen: "Play me first." The screen came alive, and there he was. Venkatesh himself, a calm, familiar face looking back at him, a recording he had made for the most important person in his life, himself. But why did a perfectly independent 71-year-old man need to leave himself a message every morning? The answer lay in something he had been quietly learning to live with: Alzheimer's. But this is not a story about losing memory. It is a story about refusing to lose yourself. The recording began. Venkatesh looked at his own face on the screen, and his recorded voice spoke gently. "Good morning, Venkatesh. Today is a brand new day. You are 71 years old. This is your home in Malleshwaram, Bengaluru. Your phone number is written just below this video. And the beautiful woman in the photograph beside you is Rukmini, your wife, your companion, and the love of your life. You miss her very much. But remember, you are doing wonderfully. Your son Aditya, Meera, and little Arav live just 20 minutes away in Indiranagar. They love you deeply. They check on you every day. You chose to live here independently because you love your home, your routine, and your freedom. And you are doing a magnificent job of it. Take a deep breath. Your day is already mapped out. All you have to do is live it." The recording ended. The room became silent again. Venkatesh smiled. There was no panic in his eyes, no embarrassment, no self-pity. Because he had understood something very important. He didn't need to remember everything. He simply needed to know what came next. And he had built a life that would gently remind him. When the first signs of Alzheimer's appeared, Venkatesh was frightened. There were forgotten names, misplaced keys, repeated questions, and sometimes a familiar word would simply disappear from his mind. The hardest part wasn't always forgetting. It was the uncertainty, the quiet fear of wondering, what if I forget something important tomorrow? But Venkatesh had spent 40 years as an engineer. He had built systems, solved problems, analyzed failures, and understood one fundamental principle. When a system develops a weakness, you don't simply give up, you redesign the system. So that is exactly what he did. He created reminders on his tablet. Labels appeared on kitchen shelves. Important telephone numbers were written where he could see them. Alarms marked the important moments of his day. His meals were planned, his medicines were organized, his activities were recorded, and every morning there was that little green icon. "Play me first." He wasn't trying to hide his Alzheimer's. He wasn't pretending nothing had changed. He was simply refusing to let the condition dictate how he lived. There was dignity in accepting what he could not control. And there was courage in finding ways around it. Venkatesh had made a quiet decision. Alzheimer's would be a challenge he managed. It would never become an identity that defined him. Because independence, he discovered, wasn't about proving that you needed nobody. It was about creating a life in which you could continue doing the things that mattered, with confidence, with preparation, and with dignity. And every morning, that little green icon reminded him of exactly that. "Good morning, Ruku." After listening to his morning message, Venkatesh walked quietly into the living room. The first rays of sunlight were beginning to enter through the wooden windows. On the rosewood mantelpiece stood a framed photograph. Rukmini, his Ruku. She was wearing a beautiful silk sari, her silver-grey hair neatly arranged, her smile as warm as he remembered it. Venkatesh walked toward the photograph. He gently touched the wooden frame. "Good morning, Ruku." It was such a small ritual, but he had never stopped doing it. Rukmini had been gone for some years, and yet in this house, her presence had never really disappeared. Her photograph was there, her favorite things were there, the memories of their life together were there, and most importantly, her love was still there. Venkatesh had slowly learned something profound. Some memories do not live in the mind, they live in the heart. There were moments when he could forget a name, a date, a conversation from the previous day. But when he looked at Rukmini's photograph, something inside him always knew. This was the woman he had loved. This was the woman who had walked beside him through the most important years of his life. This was home. Venkatesh smiled at her. Then he picked up his walking shoes. It was time to begin the next part of his day. The morning air around Sankey Tank was cool and fresh. A thin mist floated gently above the water. The city was only beginning to wake. Venkatesh began his morning jog along the tree-lined pathway. His footsteps settled into a familiar rhythm: left, right, left, right. He wasn't trying to prove that he was young, he wasn't running away from Alzheimer's, and he certainly wasn't trying to defeat it. He was simply running because he was alive. With every step, he felt more connected to the present moment. The cool air entered his lungs. The trees moved gently in the morning breeze. The water shimmered in the first golden rays of sunlight. And the rhythm of his footsteps seemed to say, I am here. I am moving. I am still living. Perhaps that was why his morning walk had become so important. It wasn't just exercise, it was a reminder. A reminder that his life was happening now. Not yesterday, not tomorrow. Now, when he returned home, Venkatesh prepared his morning protein shake. Before taking the first sip, he walked over Rukmini's photograph. He raised the glass gently. To good health, my love. Then he smiled and drank. At 7 o'clock, another familiar ritual began. Venkatesh opened WhatsApp and started a group voice call. Within seconds, 3 familiar voices filled the room. His college friends, together, they proudly called themselves the old boys of UVCE. They had known one another for more than 5 decades. And somehow, whenever they spoke, it felt as though they were 20 again. They talked about college, they argued about Indian cricket, they discussed politics, they complained about their knees, and, most importantly, they laughed. One of them suddenly asked, Do you remember Professor Rao? Venkatesh burst out laughing. Remember him? I still have nightmares about his mathematics. The others exploded with laughter. For a few precious minutes, Venkatesh forgot about everything else. There was no diagnosis, no reminder, no tablet, no schedule. There were simply 4 old friends sharing memories. And perhaps that was another kind of exercise for the brain. Not a crossword, not a puzzle, not a complicated game, just laughter, conversation, and the comfort of people who had known you long before life became complicated. After the laughter came silence, Venkatesh entered his small prayer room. The fragrance of Mysore sandalwood filled the air. He lit the brass Kamakshi lamp, the tiny flame flickered gently. He folded his hands, closed his eyes, and began his morning shlokas. His prayer was simple. He did not ask God to give him back every memory he had lost. He did not ask for a life without difficulty. And he did not ask to know what tomorrow would bring. He simply asked for the strength to live today well, for the wisdom to accept what he could not change, and for the courage to make the most of what he still had. For a few moments, everything became still. The world outside disappeared. There was only the soft flame, the fragrance of sandalwood, and the quiet rhythm of his prayer. When Venkatesh finally opened his eyes, the Kamakshi lamp was still burning. He looked at the little flame and smiled, because perhaps that was all he needed to remember. Life may change, the mind may change, circumstances may change, but as long as there is still a flame within us, there is still a reason to keep going. At 8:30 a.m., the tablet chimed again. A familiar message appeared. Alarm, cooking time. The instructions were simple. Vegetables were in the refrigerator drawers, pulses, rice and atta were on the labeled middle shelves. Utensils and cooking pots were in the lower cabinets. And there was one final reminder. Cook enough for brunch and dinner. Venkatesh smiled. He knew exactly what to do. He opened the food playlist on the Variety is the Spice of Life YouTube channel. Recipe after recipe appeared on the screen. He scrolled for a few seconds, then stopped. Bisi Biliba, that was today's choice. Soon the quiet kitchen came alive. Rice, dal, fresh vegetables, spices. The aroma of Karnataka filled the house. Venkatesh moved around the kitchen with comfortable confidence. There was no confusion, no searching, no second guessing. Everything had a place, everything had a label, and everything had been designed to make life easier. He prepared enough food for both brunch and dinner. 1 cooking session, 2 meals taken care of. For Venkatesh, cooking had become more than a daily chore. It had become a creative activity, something useful, something enjoyable, something he could still do entirely on his own. And perhaps this was one of the greatest lessons he had learned. Independence doesn't always mean doing everything without help. Sometimes independence means designing your life intelligently enough that you can continue doing the things you love. Venkatesh had another little system. 5 master check-in alarms spread across his day, 9 in the morning, 12 noon, 3 in the afternoon, 6 in the evening, and 9 at night. Whenever an alarm sounded, he recorded a short video, just 30 seconds. At 9 o'clock, he looked into the camera. Brunch is ready and enjoyed. Now off to check the stock markets. A little later, he sat down at his study desk. A whiteboard displayed his trading rules. His physical ledger lay open beside him. For decades, Venkatesh had worked with numbers. He wasn't going to stop simply because he was 71. He analyzed the markets, recorded his trades, and kept his mind engaged. At noon, another alarm sounded. He recorded, trading done with a small gain. House is clean. Time for my newspaper. The afternoon moved gently along. At 2, it was time for hot green tea. At 3, another little video. Green tea finished. Now I'm reading a chapter of my book. At 4, evening tea time. And at 6, evening walk completed. Evening puja done. These recordings were more than reminders. They were little anchors. They connected one part of his day to the next, and if his memory ever asked, "What did I do today?" Venkatesh already had the answer. He could simply press play. That afternoon, Venkatesh decided to do something special. The weekend was approaching, and he wanted to have a few surprises ready for his family. He baked a fresh batch of whole wheat Mysore pak for Meera. He prepared the homemade spice blend that Aditya loved. Then, during his evening walk, he stopped at a neighborhood bookstore. He wandered slowly through the children's section. And then he saw it, a beautifully illustrated storybook. Perfect for Arav, Venkatesh picked it up, turned a few pages, and smiled. He could already imagine his grandson sitting beside him, asking questions, interrupting the story, and then asking him to read it all over again. Perhaps twice, perhaps 3 times. Venkatesh didn't mind. He bought the book because there is something beautiful about preparing a little surprise for someone you love. And perhaps love is not always expressed through grand gestures. Sometimes it is a sweet prepared in the kitchen, a favorite spice blend, a storybook chosen from a shelf, a little something kept aside just for the people who matter. Love doesn't require perfect memory. It simply requires a heart that still wants to give. That evening, Venkatesh's phone rang. It was Aditya. "Hey Dad, just checking in. How's your day going?" Venkatesh smiled. "Wonderful, Maga. What did you do today?" Venkatesh began telling him. He spoke about his morning walk, the call with the old boys of UVCE, the busy belly bath, the stock market, his reading, his evening walk. And then, suddenly, he remembered something else. "I found something special for Ira." "What?" Venkatesh smiled mischievously. "That is a secret." Aditya laughed. "Dad, we'll see you this weekend. I'll be waiting." The call ended. Venkatesh sat quietly for a moment and thought about what his son had asked him. Aditya hadn't asked, "Did you forget anything today?" He hadn't asked, "Did you take care of everything?" He had simply asked, "How was your day?" There was love in that question. And perhaps there was another lesson there. Sometimes, when someone we love is struggling with something, we become so focused on what they may have forgotten that we forget to ask them about what they still remember. Venkatesh still remembered how to laugh. He remembered his friends. He remembered how to cook. He remembered the joy of choosing a book for his grandson. He remembered the taste of his wife's favorite memories. And most importantly, he remembered how to love. That was enough. By 8:30 that evening, the house had become quiet. The dishes were done, the kitchen was clean, the day's activities were over. Venkatesh switched on the small lamp at his study desk and sat down. He opened his tablet one by one. He played back the short videos he had recorded during the day. 9 in the morning, 12 noon, 3 in the afternoon, 6 in the evening. There he was, walking, cooking, working, reading, praying, laughing, living. Venkatesh watched quietly. A gentle smile appeared on his face. He wasn't watching those recordings because he had failed. Quite the opposite. He was watching them because he had found a way to succeed. Each little video was an anchor, a bridge between one moment and the next, a way of saying to himself, "Yes, I was here. Yes, I did this. Yes, this day really happened." When the last recording finished, Venkatesh reached for his journal. He opened it to a fresh page. At the top, he wrote, "3 good things about today." He paused, then began. "I walked beside Sankey Tank." He wrote the second. "I laughed with my old friends." Then the third. "I prepared something for the people I love." Venkatesh looked at the 3 sentences. He smiled. Then, after a moment's thought, he added one more. "I live today with dignity." He closed the journal for Venkatesh. That was enough. The house was almost completely silent. Now Venkatesh switched off the study light. Then he slowly walked toward the living room, toward the rosewood mantelpiece, toward Rukmini. Her photograph was waiting for him. The warm light from a nearby lamp fell gently across her face. Venkatesh stood before her for a few seconds. He didn't speak. He simply looked at her. Then, softly, "Rukku," his voice trembled. "I still miss you." He touched the frame. A tear slowly appeared in his eye. "Sometimes," he paused, "I worry that one day I may forget something about you." The words hung quietly in the room. Then Venkatesh smiled. "But don't worry. I have photographs. I have our stories. I have this home. And I have a heart that still remembers how much I loved you. He leaned closer. His fingers gently rested on the wooden frame. You know, Ruku, you taught me something that I understand even more clearly now. Life isn't measured by how many years we have. He took a breath. It is measured by how much love we put into the years we are given. Another tear rolled down his cheek. He wiped it gently. So don't worry about me. I am going to keep living. I am going to keep walking. I am going to keep cooking. I am going to keep laughing with my friends. And I am going to keep spoiling our grandson. A small smile appeared. Then he looked at her photograph again. And whenever I forget something, he paused. I'll simply find another way to remember. Venkatesh leaned forward and gently kissed the photograph. Good night, Ruku. He remained there for a few moments, then slowly walked away. At exactly 9 o'clock, the final alarm sounded. Venkatesh sat on the edge of his bed. He positioned the tablet in front of him and pressed record. His own face appeared on the screen. He looked directly at himself and smiled. Good night, Venkatesh. You had a good day. You walked, you cooked, you laughed, you worked, you prayed, you remembered. He paused. Then his expression softened. And even when you didn't remember everything, another pause. You remembered what mattered. Venkatesh smiled. Tomorrow is another day. You are safe, you are loved, and you are doing wonderfully. He stopped recording. The screen went dark. For a moment, the bedroom was completely silent. Then the little green icon appeared again. Play me first. The same three words that had greeted him that morning. But somehow, they meant something different now. At 4:30 a.m., they had been a reminder. Now, they had become a promise. A promise that tomorrow morning, he would wake up and begin again. Venkatesh placed the tablet beside his bed. He switched off the lamp and slowly closed his eyes. Perhaps that is what Venkatesh's story teaches us. Life doesn't promise that everything will remain the way it is today. Memory may fade, people we love may leave us, our bodies may slow down, the world around us may change, and sometimes the future may frighten us. But none of that means we stop living. We adapt, we find new ways forward. We ask for help when we need it, we create routines. We keep our friendships alive, we continue learning, we continue creating, we continue giving, and above all, we continue loving. Because life isn't always about holding on to everything. Sometimes it is about holding on to what matters. A conversation with an old friend, a morning walk, a meal cooked with your own hands, a book chosen for a grandchild, a prayer whispered in silence, a photograph of someone you will love forever. These may look like ordinary moments, but perhaps these are the moments that make a life extraordinary. So, tomorrow morning when your alarm rings, don't think about everything that has to be done. Don't worry about yesterday. Don't be afraid of tomorrow. Just open your eyes, take a deep breath, and remember one simple thing. You are here, you are loved, and there is still another beautiful day waiting for you. So play me first and then go live.